4th, 2022 workshop of the Mount Horeb Area School District's Board of Education shall come to order. Roll call: Leah. Here. Jim.
Here.
Jeff.
Here.
Rod.
Yes.
Jessica. Here. And Diana has an excused absence this evening. Dr. Solano, has this meeting been properly noticed and certified? Thank you. Item 2A, approval of the presented revised agenda. Are there any revision requests from the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Leah and seconded by Jeff to approve the agenda as presented. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The agenda is approved. Item 3A, personnel transactions. Dr. Solano, are there remarks for us?
Good evening. Again, board members, attached you'll also find an addendum to our board items here.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion made by Jeff and seconded by Jessica to approve the personnel transactions with the addendum. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 4A, approval of our consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Jessica and seconded by Leah to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Moving on to item 5, our showpiece this evening, referendum planning considerations. This evening we are joined by School Perceptions to review a draft of our community survey as the full board. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Rob. If you'd like, you're welcome to
Sure, thank you.
see up front here. And while Rob is making his way to the table, please allow me to extend a note of gratitude to board members Heiss and Aragoni. They've been a part of a number of conversations we've held with School Perceptions in order to bring a draft presentation to you tonight. Rob is here tonight on behalf of School Perceptions to kind of walk you through a draft of the tool. We have also supplied for you at the request of board members copies of our last survey as well as the results, just so you can kind of get a feel for where things are at. So with that being said, good evening to you, Rob.
Howdy, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We know that you guys have a lot of business around the state right now. Tomorrow's an important day.
Yeah, yes it is. Less so for, I'll sleep fine tonight, but.
School district, right? Well, I will put up a copy of the draft item. Actually, since we gave this to you on Friday night, the senior leadership team has taken some time to review it a little bit further and have some minor tweaks that we'd like to bring to your attention. So, Dr. Rob, we'll let you take it from here.
Sure. All right, thank you. Again, I'm Rob Denise with School Perceptions. Just very briefly about me, because I was not the project lead last time School Perceptions was here. Born and raised in northeastern Wisconsin, in a small farming community, Algoma. Made my way down to UW. I was a high school social studies teacher in Evansville, where we passed a referendum while I was teaching, and I got very interested in why are we not that happens around the state. So for reasons I'm still coming to terms with, I decided I wanted to go to grad school. Best thing about grad school is it ends, so that's good. It's done now. So I got my PhD from UW, where I studied political behavior in school referendums, or in a nutshell, why do people vote yes, why do they vote no, why do they change their minds, or why do they choose not to. So I found a pretty natural home with School Perceptions, and I kind of work in both worlds, both meaning what you see and what you are planning here for tonight in a pre-referendum survey. But once that teacher hat goes on, it's always on. It's a point of pride, and so I do a lot of work in our staff, student, and parent world as well, which is ramping up towards the end of the year. So with regard to your specific survey here, it's an 8-page survey, which is very typical for any sort of facility survey. Reason being, same principle as last time. We really believe our surveys serve two purposes. One of them is to educate your community members on what you've been doing, your planning, your background, how you've gotten to this point. The second, or the other side of the coin, the second primary purpose is to do exactly what you'd expect a survey to do, which is to collect both the quantitative and qualitative data so that you can make decisions moving forward on what's best for your school district. Now, the way we collect that data, again, in those 8 pages, and by the way, just logistically, same process as last time. There's two 11.5 by 17 sheets of paper that are folded in half to make eight panels. And we begin with our opening letter. And in general, our principle, not only in the opening letter, but in general in a survey, is if there are words we can take out, we do. Simple and short, simple and short. Usually the more words that are there, the more people don't read them. And if it feels like homework, they'll set it aside and they won't take it, which is not good news, obviously, because if people don't take a survey, we can't come back to you with data that is predictive and useful for you over the long term. So In general, simple and short, simple and short. We are writing for people that are never in this room, people that have no idea a lick about school finance, which is most people, a lick about school finance or anything that's been going on in the community. So, with that being said, in your opening letter here, we talk a little bit about how there's lots to be proud of in your district, including exceeding expectations according to those report cards. And these are possible only because of the tremendous support you receive from the community. You want to do what's best for students, but there are some challenges ahead in three main areas. So you're looking to test the waters in terms of the community's potential support for additional funding to maintain your programs and services. You need some help and some feedback on directions for the Early Learning Center. And then finally, some other facility projects that were not included in the last referendum, and we need the community's help to determine if and when this work should be done. And you as the board are committed to reflecting the priorities of the taxpayers, which is why we need them to fill out this survey. And certainly I will pause for feedback in just a moment here, but just to finish off the opening letter, right smack dab in the middle is how people actually take the survey. So there are really two options. I could fill out the survey to my heart's content online. As we share drafts back and forth, you will always see a hole there next to the survey access code. That doesn't go into place until we actually send it off to the printer. So you'll obviously get one of those when you get it at home, but you'll see that empty until we get it off to the printer. And about 70 to 90% or so of any given community takes it online. But some people don't have reliable internet at home or can't afford internet at home, or just prefer to take it on paper, and they can certainly do that. And that will come directly back to us at School Perceptions. We don't want you part of that process. We remove you from that process on purpose in the name of confidentiality. There are additional surveys that can be available. So right around a week before this lands in mailboxes, we'll provide the district office with some extra codes. Reason being, there are multi-generational households, obviously. Maybe there's grandparents that live in the household. Maybe parents don't necessarily agree on the survey, which is not uncommon. And so they can call the district office and say, hey, we just need a couple of extra codes, or somebody throws it away or whatnot. We can certainly translate this into Spanish for you, and then we'll note when the survey needs to be completed. Finally, we'll note that if somebody has a disability that makes it difficult to take the survey, help can be found at the district office. And then finally, results will be reported at a meeting and on the district's website. And this is signed by both the superintendent, Steve, over here to my right, and the entirety of the board. So let me pause there and see what kind of questions you have, either in terms of content or the logistics of survey administration.
No, this looks pretty identical to the last one that we saw.
Yeah, format will be identical, yep. Then moving on to the next page. What you see up top is exactly what I was speaking about before with our education piece. So we want to note for people that there are two types of referenda that school districts in Wisconsin can use. One of them being operational. So this is what you would use, or any district would use, to increase the revenue limit. You have not asked for that type of referendum since '99. Or there's the capital question, which you and any other district in the state would use to pay for major building projects. And then again, we're noting that this is the type of referendum the district used in 2017 to fund the updates for your facilities. Are they common? Yes. Nearly 350 districts across the state, which is over 8 in 10, have passed referenda. And in your region alone, which is in CISA 2, 82% of school districts have supported a referendum. So certainly what we're trying to get across here is this is not a Mount Horeb thing. This is not a South Central Wisconsin thing. This is not a Dane County thing. This is really a Wisconsin thing. In fact, I think there are only 9 districts in the state that have never experienced this. We want to know how the funding has changed. So you do not receive any additional funding on a per student basis. The aid that you are receiving from the state is not keeping up with various operational costs that are noted here. And we do disclose that, yes, you did receive COVID-19 relief funding from the federal government, but it's a one-time source. It is not something that can be billed for decades worth of planning. And then we're trying to contextualize your mill rate a bit here. And you're going to see this chart, and then there's a chart on the next page that I'll get to in just a moment. And this is really trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So on this particular page, we're talking about how the mill rate definitionally is used to calculate your share of property taxes, and it's dropped by more than 20% just over the last few years, and you're now the lowest among your Dane County comparisons. Why? Well, part of that is because you've had the opportunity to prepay debt. So Verona on down to Middleton Cross Plains. We're down here in the bottom right at 834 for Mount Horeb. And really this is paired with the graph on the next page then, because there's never one graph that pleases everybody. When we just include, say, your district, the first question somebody asks is, what is that like? Are we higher? Are we lower? Is that kind of in the middle of the pack compared to other districts? And other folks will say, I don't care, I don't pay taxes in Verona. I pay taxes here, you tell me what mine is. And so really I think we kind of have the best of both worlds here, where we can contextualize your mill rate in terms of geographic comparisons, but we can also provide you comparisons relative to yourself, which is what this graph is doing here, showing kind of that sweet spot of a stair step down over the last half decade or so. So hopefully pleasing everybody there. But let me pause there before I talk about this page and just see if there's any questions about the education piece of the previous page.
Not hearing any, thank you.
Then we'll actually get into the operational funding bit. So we'll talk about the financial projections, which are currently forecasting a budget shortfall for next year. So you're considering an operational referendum to maintain those programs and services and attract and retain your high quality staff. And then we get into a lot of placeholders here. So really my goal for you tonight was to kind of see how these pieces fit together. I completely made this up. I have no idea if 20 cents is even near what you're going to be doing. But nevertheless, I wanted you to show how we present this so that we can say, yes, there will be an impact, we assume. But even with that impact, again, to contextualize this, it may be lower than fill in the blank here, 2020, 2021, or 1920, or so on, so that people kind of have an idea of, all right, this is a comparable or lower than what I paid in taxes in X year. So very placeholder here, but just so you can kind of get a feel for how we present it. And then we ask the question, would you support a whatever recurring operational referendum to maintain our programs and services? And there are really, again, kind of two birds with one stone that we have to do here. One is disclosing how much this is going to cost in total, and try to reflect as close as we can in friendly language what this will look like on a ballot. At the same time though, when you are walking into a ballot box, obviously you're not handed a ballot with your tax impacts. So we're trying to show both here. What is this in total going to cost, or in other words, what is the district going to ask for? But then, for me as a local taxpayer, how much is this going to cost me for every $100,000 worth of property value? And really, people will base their decision off of both. What's the total pot, and what's this going to cost me? On a scale of definitely yes to definitely no. And then we'll leave some room for comments, questions, and suggestions. That rounds out your operations bit, and then we turn the corner here a little bit. So now we're going to talk about facility planning. And the first thing we do here is more related to that education piece again. We want to talk a little bit about what planning you've done to get you to this point. And one of the reasons why we do this is I kind of think of it akin to buying a car, where if somebody says, hey, I got a car for sale, do you want to buy it? I would say, well, I don't know, what's wrong with my car? How much is this car going to cost? How many miles are on it? What color is it? I got a lot of questions, and I need you to help me fill out what's wrong with my car before I'm interested in telling you whether or not I want a new car or not. And so that's what the upper half of this page is saying here. There are some things that we do our best to keep our buildings in good working order, but some of these things collectively are just too big for our annual budgets, which are things like your roof, your HVAC systems, your classroom sizes, your meeting rooms, your exterior, your fire panel, your floors, parking lots, ADA accessibility, and whatnot. And for your knowledge, this is probably the one page where I am okay contradicting myself in terms of wording this. And the reason I say that is because we have to provide enough of a story for, as you move forward, whether it's in this survey or moving on down the road here, we have to at least paint up enough of a need where people can say, yeah, X million or whatever the cost ultimately is down the road, that makes sense. There are a lot of needs here. I don't even have to read all the words on this page, and I would look and say, yeah, there are some serious needs at the ELC in this community, and we're going to have to do something about that pretty soon. And then we'll ask the question, which one would you like us to explore as we put together this facility steering committee over the next few months? We could close the ELC and add on to the primary center, or we could work with what we got, which is renovate and expand the current ELC. You tell us which option you'd like us to explore. Nobody doesn't like to be asked what their advice is. Usually people are yearning to be said, give me some advice, or yearning to be asked. And so we'll say, would you like to explore 1, 2, would you not support either of these, or are you just not sure and need more information? One of the things that I think will be helpful for you here is looking at it. You know, you kind of look and say, that not sure, need more information. Do I want that? You know, is it helpful to try to steer people into one direction or the other? And the shorter answer is, that's actually pretty helpful at this point, I think, because it'll kind of give you an insight into how much have people thought about this? Are there a lot of people on the fence? And if you're getting data back that says 50% are not sure, need more information, I think that's just as telling as people being able to offer you opinion, because people simply may not know what the answer is. And typically when people don't know, the answer down the road will be no. People won't say, I'm not quite sure what you're gonna do, but I will support a tax increase. Nobody thinks like that, so I think it will be helpful for you to know how many people are sitting on the fence here. We will take a little bit of a turn on the next page. So questions about where we've been in the last couple of minutes, or what kinds of data we'll get back for you here.
Yes, can you go back to the operational funding of that page, please? So in the opening paragraph, we use language maintain current programs and services, and we also use language retain, attract high quality staff. We don't directly say, however, increase wages, and I'm wondering if that was a deliberate choice.
It is, yeah, and we're trying to rope that into attracting and retaining high quality staff, whether it be through that route or a different route. Typically though, that leads to more political questions than you may want to be the focus of this particular survey in terms of, well, what are those wages? How much do they compare to the median in Mount Horeb? And is that the right time? And do we want that, knowing what inflation could be and whatnot? So I would stick to retain and attract high quality staff, because I think it's also loose enough where it doesn't lock you into, yes, we're for sure going to do this, especially with a new biennium budget coming up. You know, as a former teacher, I would have loved to have that in writing, but I also want to give you the opportunity to have some flexibility there down the road. All that being said, you know, we'll certainly do what you would like to do. If you'd like to put that in there, I'm certainly not going to say no. But I think what you had said is kind of wrapped into the retaining and attracting high quality staff.
May I ask a question? Scrolling down to the ELC question. Are these forced choices? Are they going to have to pick one? I'm just thinking about, like, what if I don't really have a preference. I support the district, and whichever one they think, option 1 or option 2 is fine with me. Like, that's not could I just check off 1 and 2, or?
Yeah, that must have been, I don't know if it went back and forth on a draft, but yes, you're right. I think what may have happened was we may have taken out mark all that apply below. So what we would do is, the third one would be, I would support either option.
That's going to give us really mushy results. Because it's one thing to say, well, I don't really know, but it's another thing to say, I don't really know, so I'm going to check all the, it's just, it's mush. In my opinion.
Thinking about how that would come back down the road. The difficulty with that maybe is you won't be able to, you'll have clear direction, which is beneficial. You won't know necessarily maybe how many people from option 2 would come over to option 1, should that be the ultimate path.
So in the last time we asked this, it was like 48-48. It was split right down the middle.
Yeah.
When you asked it before, was there I support either one option or not? I don't recall.
No, it was what Rod had just mentioned. Upgrade, close the early learning center, or I'm undecided. And it was, very split. Non-parents, non-staff, it was almost a third for each, almost exactly.
Which is why we're like, maybe we table this, and now. So I get what you're saying, but I struggle, because if we can get them, if they're like, I would pick either of those. Maybe it swings the at least 50-50 to.
No, but then so then the problem is, if that's the number one option, how do you
do you then put them?
How do you, because ultimately what we have to be thinking about is not how pretty this looks on the page, but what message are we gonna deliver based on the information that we gather in this survey to the community? And I don't know what, I don't know.
But, oh, it's like, okay, say 50% come back for 1, 20% come back to 2, and 20% come back to 3, we at least know that we would have support to do something.
Well, you'd know you'd have support at 50, so you.
Well, okay, bad numbers, but like, you would know though, I feel like you would at least know that there's support to do something, whereas last time, just, it was just so split. I don't
But
know.
was that the right answer or the wrong answer that the survey gave us last time?
I don't know. I don't know if somebody, so if I was forced to pick one, I'd be like, maybe my first choice is 2 and my second choice is 1. Maybe I would have checked the box that says, I'd support either, because we have to do something. I don't know. I feel like it gives us more information than we had last time.
So you've got 3 options for and only 1 against. That's another argument against it. So you've got 3 positive response categories and only 1 against. With a neutral.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it support. I think I'd call it preference.
Well, either way, they're putting their, I mean, those first 3 are positive preferences. That they're expressing a positive preference. And we have 1 response category, only 1 response category that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, methodologically, that's pretty screwed up.
Not if you know you're going to do something.
Well, but okay, that's a whole other question,
Yep.
right?
So if we said, should we do something at the ELC? That I would say yes. I wouldn't say yes, kind of, a little bit of it, and no. Then I would agree with you methodologically, that would
Right.
be incorrect. Here I would say because you know you're going to do something.
Do we? I mean, do we?
We have to put money into it some way. We need a roof. Didn't you see the list? We need a roof.
Okay, you start making that argument in the community in the absence of a survey. I'm not going to.
That's why we're doing the survey.
No, that's my point. And so if that's the point, then we've just overloaded the survey with positive response categories.
Well, but those positive response categories all have very different price points. I mean, the first 2 in no is no. I mean, you can't nuance no. When you say, no, I don't want to do this, that's no. That's, price point that out.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I made my point. I think it's screwed up.
The other thing you could do, and this is not a question, but you could ask somebody, do you want us to explore a fix at the ELC? If you would support a fix, which option would you prefer?
So do it like branched?
Well, so the first question would say, would you like us to, or do you believe the district should explore, options to whatever, renovate or update, expand, whatever the verb is, to the ELC? And the second question would say, if the community supports pursuing a solution to the ELC, which option do you prefer? So that the methodologically in the first question doesn't matter, it's yes or no, or I'm not sure.
Right.
And then pen come to paper, if the community supports that, then I gotta tell you which one I want.
Yeah, that's a better approach.
Then you'd have to go up to the stuff above. And you'd have to add in a lot more than what you have there. Because air handlers, boilers are 18 years old. We were told they're good for 20.
Mm-hmm.
And when they decide to stop, they will just stop.
Mm-hmm.
They're German made. So, and you won't be able to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
So, the air handlers is original 65. We're piecing them together
Mhm.
with it's time to get rid of that junk if it goes that way.
Mhm.
But, you know, a long ways away from what you gotta put together yet, you know? Because we don't know what we're gonna do here tonight, but,
Mhm.
and after 2 weeks, I won't be here anyway, so it'll be somebody else's problem to take care of. So, there's all kinds of gifts that we don't know and probably won't know until September maybe.
The ifs being, say more about that. What?
The ifs of how this will piece together before you put it out to the people for the survey.
This particular one, would go out this spring.
Will go out in May then.
Yeah, I think it was
Late
late
May
or
or June.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mid-May, maybe something like that, yeah.
And they'll get what, 4 weeks to get it back?
2.5 or so?
Okay.
No.
Because if you, like I said, if you change that wording to what you were saying
Mhm.
the other way,
Mhm.
you're gonna have to add everything that's wrong with the building in that upper piece.
Most people aren't gonna read everything that's wrong, anyhow. They'll wanna know, like, yes, there's something wrong with the HVAC, but the more we get into HVAC words, the more people's eyes are gonna gloss over. Like chiller, I mean, nobody will know, I don't think, what that means. And they'll wanna know that something's wrong with the HVAC maybe, and that it's original or whatever, 45 years old. But I wouldn't go too much more than what's there. I'm certainly, I mean, if there are more issues, I'm certainly happy to add them in. But yeah.
Well, most of the plumbing we did 2 years ago.
Okay.
There's some plumbing work, there's some plumbing work that still needs to be done. We don't have air conditioning in that building, so we were trying to, again, be as few words as possible, but also describe the fact that we need ventilation. We do need, to your point, the boilers.
Oh, yeah.
That plumbing,
Boilers for sure,
yeah.
because those are fuel-eating, money-grubbing things.
Jeff, I think this is where it wraps it all together with the estimated cost, right?
Yeah. Thank you for
All the
that.
missing bullet points.
Those, well, that was what it would cost the last time, between 19 and 21 million. Tear down the old building and build a new one.
We took the information from the last ELC referendum survey, and at that time upgrading was about 7 to 8 million, and then building a new one back in 16 was 14 and a half, almost 16 and a half. Knowing what we know about current market conditions, we know that those figures are exponentially higher. And so I was getting a little nervous about actually including an estimation, because I'd hate for someone to say, but you said it was gonna be 19 to 21 million, and we wouldn't even likely be looking to make any kind of change until 23 at the earliest.
Yeah. And, but we,
Have you put it back in though, if that's what people would prefer to see. We just thought,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
somewhere along the way, between 25 and 27, when North Cape Commons is done, the school district is gonna get a big chunk of money from that. And, I don't know how much that'll be, but
Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, I got nothing.
If you take out the costs now, I think I could still make a decision, even if the costs weren't in there, especially because those probably went up 10% since I drove here.
If you can get these things.
Right, that too. So here though, the good news is that I can tell you to explore till the cows come home, and it's not gonna cost me a nickel as a taxpayer. You can explore all you want. I might even tell you no later on. In fact, I might tell you no, I don't want you to do this right now anyhow, but you can explore whatever option you want. So I think it's okay now to ask without the estimated costs, because you're not necessarily asking people to approve this on a referendum question yet. That will come later on. But I think that the question for this group would be, when you're back around this table in mid-June is, what question do you want answered? Do you want answered whether or not the community wants to do work here? And if so, then I think I would lean towards a yes or no. If the consensus is, we know we have to do something here, and now we're at the point where we need to know somebody's preference on which option it is, then this question will get you there.
I think since it came back 50-50 last time, we have to know what people are gonna want, what people will support.
Also, even though it is dangerous to put a cost on, what it shows between option 1 and 2 is twice as much, right? And so that is very useful as a voter. If I choose option 1, I'm paying twice as much. Option 2 is half, right? So that distinction, I think, is the most useful, regardless of what numbers you're putting in there.
So instead of numbers, do you put like higher cost option, lower cost option, or something
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
that just says which one? I mean, most people I think would assume if you build a building from scratch, it's going to cost more than renovating, but I've seen enough renovation shows to know that that's not always true.
I also watch HGTV.
So,
I think an actual number is helpful, opposed to, more expensive, less expensive. If less expenses is a fourth the cost,
right.
or, if it's only a couple $1 million less just to build a new building, that would sway me as a taxpayer.
Estimated cost.
Okay, if I pop in at least a year, because next year at this time, maybe it might be trying to find lumber.
Oh,
I wasn't quite tracking, so I didn't want to lose track of Jessica's thought, but at the same time, I want to make certain that we've got it baked into option 1 or 2. Is that something maybe you and I can work offline about how to make the wordsmithing?
Say more.
Yeah, so you might recall we had some conversation here moments ago just about how to get as much information about whether or not a potential candidate, or excuse me, a potential voter would want to explore whatever option the district supports. How do we factor that into this without being leading? To Rod's point, we don't want to have 3 options that are, or 4 options out of 5 being pro. Is there some way that you and I can maybe work offline and try to get at how to get to Jessica's point without being too leading, if that's even possible? I don't know.
Well, I think I think you're saying the same thing from my point a minute ago, is if the answer is yes, we have to do something with this building, then I would put it right there in the middle in number 3, or a new number 3 after number 2, after in the box, explore option 2.
Okay.
Right after that, I would support either of these options.
Okay, so go back to that. I see.
That's what I think on the back end, just from a data analysis perspective, it's easier to look at that than to try to add them and do the mark all that apply. And sometimes people choose, I don't want either, and option 1. So if we force people to choose one and only one, that's a little bit easier. You get more clean data. But to Rod's point, this does, the implication of this is we're going to do something. We've kind of answered that question for you already. Now we're at the point where we want to know which one you want to do.
So, question then. So we say explore 1, explore 2, and then the 4th one now says I would not support any of these options. Should it say I would not support exploring any of these options? Because it does make it sound like
Sure.
we've made some, I don't know.
In fact, Steve, you could change any to either. I think that was left over from when there were 3 options, maybe.
Oh, yes.
Exploring either option.
Just leave it like this.
I would not support.
Either option.
Yep, either option right there would be fine. The good news, maybe to Rod's point again, is people that don't want to support anything will find that button.
They're going to be looking for it.
Yes, they are.
Good, thank you.
One thing that I would add, on the next page, Steve, I really like the breakdown of the primary center, grades 1 through 2 built in 1918, renovations. We do that for every other building. I understand less is more, but would it make sense going back up a page, back up to our ELC page
Yeah.
to add the same thing right there?
I like it.
You know, one of our bullet points, cabinetry countertops are original to the building. You know, if we don't add something like this,
Yeah.
it was the original.
Right, good point.
Look up this information
Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, what do you know?
The EOC wasn't built in 1965. You guys freaking loaded it up.
Thank you. Other suggestions on this page?
Moving down to the remainder here, then from a visual perspective, it all looks very similar on purpose, so I get in the hang of answering these questions fairly efficiently. So we note that in addition to the ELC, there are other facility challenges that we've identified, and so the scale here is high, medium, or low. High being address this immediately, so whatever plans this steering committee is coming up with, we want it to be in there. Medium is sure it's important, but I want you to address it in a future project, or low is this is not a priority, you do not address it in the near future for me.
Yeah, we need a couple more on the positive side over here.
On the high, medium?
Yeah.
Extra.
Extra.
Now we're on the same page.
It comes with a pony.
Yeah. There's money for that. Good money. No need for it. So what priority would you place in the following primary center projects? So we have 4 here. There's the building exterior, the playground, the floors, the technology and data center. But for every single one, the goal on the back end here would be able to, essentially you could disaggregate this in 2 ways. You could say, show me the highest priority projects across any of the buildings, top to bottom. You know, maybe number 1 is at the high school, 2 is at the primary, 3 is at the intermediate center that way. Or alternatively, you could just say, well, just show me the priority at the primary center. Just show me what the highest priority items are at the intermediate center, and so on. But either way, all of these are set up in the exact same way. So the projects that are here, give me your priority. And again, this is essentially giving the permission slip signed to this facility steering committee in terms of what are we trying to tick off right now? What is on our to-do list for right now that we need to come back to the community and offer a solution for? You know, whether this is simply high priority or, you know, we don't know what this data is going to look like yet, but essentially this is building the maybe to-do list is a good way of thinking about it for the facility steering committee. What do they need to come up to for a solution for that we feel like the community will support? And then if and when another survey is coming up down the road, then we repeat that and say, you know, we had a survey that went out in May of 2022. This is what we heard. The community told us that X, Y, and Z projects were prioritized. Now our facility steering committee came up with solutions for these. Here is what they are. So kind of always coming back to the point that you know, we're not throwing darts at the wall. This isn't a Steve decision. This isn't necessarily a board decision. This is something that we built a committee for with whomever on it in order to figure out what these solutions are.
I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere on there, you gotta add roof
For the PC?
for the PC. It ain't bad.
It just got a new roof in 2012, yes?
I can get it right. Don't worry.
Hey, Kurt,
Thank you, Ron.
say that the roof needed a little bit of
Sorry.
need.
At the PC, I would say I don't have anything that gives me an indication that I need repairs on the roof.
Not at the roof yet.
Nope, it was like you put it on in 2012 and, you know, it's gonna be at least a 25 to 30 year.
I just panicked. I was like, no, that's 10 years.
I think there was some tuck point or
The envelope, the brick, the original 18 brick is in need of some tuck pointing and such.
That is, okay,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
brick work, yeah.
Right now we have, on April 18th, you'll get this packet that everybody saw at Finance the other day, but it's the report card that David and his team had put together and saying the roof looks very good, and then he forecasts what our long range and short range facility needs might be as well. So we try to layer those
doing brickworks for the playground, the floors, but why? I don't know, as someone not here, I wouldn't know why do we need to worry about the data center? Like, nothing in there tells me, is it outgrown its space? I can kind of guess that. But I have, if it is something we need, I think we need to provide more information, or I think you're gonna get a lot of, I'm not sure, or low, because it doesn't seem
Sure.
to.
Do we want to call out the fact that it's prone to flooding?
That seems important.
I don't want that in my data center. Yeah, prone to flooding, I think it's too small.
Children being electrocuted.
It's just the staff.
That data center used to be in the high school, in the library, the back room. And it was so hot back there, it kept melting the damn servers down, and we had to replace them every damn year.
So yes, we may need some more detail on that.
And I maybe also add to the district technology data center, like I read that and I was like.
Right, I read it as
School, like,
it's just
I
the school's data, like that.
I was like,
the
there's
primary-
servers in the basement?
Yeah.
Like, what?
I didn't understand that as, once you said, I was like, oh yeah, that's the district's.
It's in the old locker room. Boys' locker room.
Is that right? Fascinating.
So would that be relocated in the same building? Because if not, then is it really a PC problem?
We have to find out where would be the most suitable place. Our first guess when we talked about it was the high school, just because it had more space and it had air conditioning and all those kinds of things. But we haven't gotten to a solution yet. We just want to know whether or not people see it as a problem.
But I think people are gonna see it as a PC problem and not a district problem.
Some of it, relocating the entire district's technology center out of the basement.
Which doesn't belong there in the first place, that kind of thing.
Right.
And expand its. Good feedback, thank you so much.
This
We think we got some sealing and crack work here that we can take care of. The gym is, it was just resealed with a nice new emblem here now, maybe 2 or 3 summers ago. As we look to our long-term forecast of our budget, we probably need to look at something just to take care of it then, but right now we don't see that as imminent. So it's really the original carpeting and flooring. We've been in the cafeteria, it's really hard to hear, especially in the little voices. And then obviously we're reaching end of life on things like HVAC, and we have some of the roof that needs to be replaced. Other parts of the roof were replaced with the extra money we had from the last referendum. This has not had any renovations. Rob, I didn't mean to take your thunder.
No. This is exactly what I wanted to do, just because it's all going to be the same scale. So this is exactly what we need to make sure that the projects are what you want data on.
Is there anything you think we're maybe missing or you'd like to have considered? Or?
Do we need to put that there's been no renovations? Like, does it need to say NA so it looks like it just stays consistent?
This would take us to the middle school. And thankfully had some money budgeted in the last referendum to take care of some of the roof as well as some of the brick and mortar tuck and
Yep, and HVAC,
lockers, I think.
yes, correct.
And that new front entry for the area so they could have some secured entrance.
Is that, to your point, is that number 4 here? Because that one,
Just gonna ask them.
I do need a little help there. So updating the front entrance, is that in the name of security?
That is, as a result of the windows at the storefront when they were built back in 1993, those sealants and those windows are reaching their end of life.
Okay.
And we'll shortly need to not change its look, but just rather replace those windows. Dave, am I speaking out of school?
No, you hit it just on the head. The door frames and hinges and things like that are just worn.
Okay.
I think we should call it out, because I think a lot of people are gonna think, we already did the front entrance because we built the conference rooms.
I agree with the proper wording is key.
Yeah.
And you guys are much better at those types of things than.
In fact, I wouldn't even maybe say, I wouldn't say where it's at, but I would say maybe replacing windows and doors in the front entrance or near the front entrance or something like that.
I assume that this includes whatever Paul, his list that he
Yes.
shared with you?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
anything that's appropriate.
Yes, in fact, this list is mostly
Is it?
Paul's list, yes.
He really doesn't want you to just cross it out.
It's a better description. Right now, we're running very inefficiently our lunch rotations. It's costing us more labor and time just because we don't have the necessary space for the children to eat at the same time. I think they're running, I might be wrong about this, 6 lunches? Does that sound about right? 6 lunches. And so we know that that area needs some attention anyways, and we welcome just trying to solve that problem. And then, those of you who are familiar with where the student services area is, they call it the fishbowl. And that in itself is problematic just because kids have private needs and private discussions, and there's really not an opportunity for kids, or families for that matter, to engage in those discussions in such a open space. And might there be an opportunity to expand some of that space while at the same time providing the necessary confidentiality that comes with student services work. And then lastly, as we look to our equity plans, updating our restrooms to provide for greater access for all students. Lastly, within the high school, this is where we tried to get at some of those topics that were still a persistent request from community members, while at the same time wanting to survey. We know right now that Dave and his team are working hard to get a track and field fix for this upcoming season. There's some minor cracks here or there, but long term we need to think about drainage issues that are impacting the track area. We are reaching end of life on this probably within the next 3 years or so, and we believe that in order to fix it, we really need a more thoughtful solution, which has to do with a lot of the cracking of the concrete and asphalt areas, because that's just water running through, and it's going to ruin the track no matter what we do if we don't fix it right. We know that our auditorium needs some TLC. We certainly were very fortunate out of savings that we had from the last referendum to button up things like carpeting, sound system, lighting. What else did we replace seats too?
We did not, we took all the seats out.
Oh, we took them out for the carpeting.
Correct.
Correct. But we also know right now, if you've been on that stage, the stage itself needs some love, especially with people who are dancing and the like, as well as the dressing room areas. It's pretty small. And then storage. We continually hear from our community that we need a solution to the tennis court issue, particularly around lighting. But then if you've been out there recently, you'll know that the whole area, I think, needs to be revisited in terms of redoing that whole section. We have a faction of our community that's doing some great things with a sport called pickleball. And might this be an opportunity to add pickleball to our tennis courts? And then softball, thanks to Jeff, he's been a real supporter of the softball efforts. We have our softball club who has placed a lot of money into our softball fields. However, what happens is because we don't have lights on those fields, it makes it hard for our kids to compete and finish games before dusk. And we want this to be the communities. We share this with the community, and the softball committee has asked for us to consider that. I worded this to address a potential partnership with the village for what could be a community-wide pool. We have a number of families who travel, I'm talking about even our senior citizens who travel down to Verona to utilize the pool every day. I see them when we drop off the kids to go to pool swim practice. Might this be an opportunity for us to explore a potential end of life that's coming with the local aquatic center and the school district in a joint venture to produce something indoors. And then, Jim, you said it better than I think anybody, given, by the way, congratulations, first place in the state with your students in the basketball, youth basketball. I just think that's absolutely fantastic. But we have a lot of kids who are having to practice late at night in our basketball programs and other programs. I'm talking about our youngest kids. Sometimes as late as 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, they're shutting down practice. We could use more gym space, without a doubt. And might this be an opportunity for us just to kind of get the pulse of our community on this here?
A couple comments here. So I
Please.
see for athletics, we have some pretty large capital exploration topics. But for music, we just have renovating the stage and backstage. Is there a reason we didn't add adding seats?
Oh, to the theater? I don't know that it was a question of seats or space. It was more a question of space for our classrooms in music. We just don't have a viable solution for what to do with that, because if we have to build out, we can't build up. We have to build out into that parking lot. But in terms of space for actual more seats in the auditorium, we certainly could explore it. We just don't know where it would go, given that we're kind of landlocked there. David, I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there anything you would offer that would be?
There's a couple considerations. The seating capacity of the current auditorium was determined to fit underneath the limit that you would require a sprinkler system, thereby saving a lot of money to installing a fire sprinkler system. I don't know what today's codes, what that limit is, but I would assume that if we expand it in any way, we would also have to retrofit it with a sprinkler system. I don't know if that's feasible, money-wise, logistics-wise. I don't have that kind of water. It takes a pretty big pipe to run a sprinkler system in that area. So again, if that's where the community wants to go, we'd have to explore with an architect on viability. Do we put a mezzanine in? Kind of what does that do for liability? I don't know. There's a lot that, as Steve said, it's pretty landlocked where it's at, unfortunately.
Kimberly, would you like us to consider rewording this somehow to reflect an expansion?
I think I would. I get that it's not easy. I mean, there's a cooler, and frankly, adding on to our gyms.
Right.
And this is not a commitment, this is an explore survey, so you may as well see if there is an interest in that.
Other board members, where would you like to see that language?
Is the auditorium the size of a basketball court? Could we put a basketball court where the auditorium is and put a auditorium where our new field house would go? Could we just?
That's the auditorium might be a problem.
It's like, it's fine, it just makes it easier.
You switch at halftime.
Exactly. You only have to run uphill for half the game and really, it's fine.
No, I did wonder similar things when I read the auditorium one, was that all that the, music department requested, was there a reason that it was a smaller scale proposal than some of the others?
There is a little room here. I wonder, we could separate that out. Because I may say, if I look at that, think expanding could be hefty in my wallet, but redoing the stage and relatively, that won't be as expensive. So we could renovate it, keep that the way it is, add a row right below that maybe that says, you know, expanding, you call it PAC, auditorium, what?
The theater.
Theater, okay. Expanding the theater to seat, you know, additional people and expand, you know, replace the seats that are there with new upholstery or whatever the potential project could be. What I'm hearing is primarily capacity. Okay.
Can you say replace the seats?
Well, it's easy for me to say.
How are you feeling on the seats? I think those were in pretty good shape when we took them out, no?
They're burgundy.
They're burgundy.
They certainly are functional, but, you know, they're 1997 vintage.
You get those recliners at AMC.
Yeah, the snugglers, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
How about just expand the theater to seat additional people? Would that suffice?
Yes, and just curious on the pulse, and I don't want it to look like we forgot about our drama music kids if we're getting a pulse on these huge athletic projects.
And I know that was something we got dinged on the last time. People were very upset that we didn't, because I think we didn't ask the question last time either, or the way we worded it was not the way that people expected.
I think there was a question. I don't think the answer was
They didn't like the
right for
answer.
some
Maybe that's
people.
what it was.
Thank you for that. Dr. Rob, would you want to talk a little bit about the demographic data?
Yeah, thank you. So then at the end of the day, got a line here. There are several pieces of data that allow you to slice and dice to your heart's content, up to or until you reach a pool of people that is 5 or fewer, and then we'll stop you and say, nope, that could breach confidentiality, so we won't let you go that far. From a high level though, what we're looking for when we ultimately produce a report is seeing what kind of age range we have here. When this comes to a type of survey that says, you know, well, I guess this is this type of survey since we have an operational question, we're really going to want to make sure that we're getting a good pulse from the community, especially those folks that are senior citizens, especially knowing that, and this isn't just a Mount Horeb or a Wisconsin thing, but 65 plus are your most loyal voters. Yes or no, 65 plus have near perfect attendance at elections, so we want to know what they're thinking. 18 to 24 are the flip side, which is not a resounding endorsement of 18 to 24-year-olds, but if we get 1% of survey takers to be 18 to 24, that'll be a W. And so it's kind of a bell shape. You'll see that it's kind of that 25 to 54 will kind of go up and down. It's prime parenting age. A lot of your staff are going to be in that age. You'll probably see it go down a little bit in the 55 to 64 age range, and then it go back up at 65 plus. And, you know, if you're a senior citizen on a fixed income, you definitely want to have a say in what can affect your property taxes. So I'll be looking for that. We'll ask, is your primary residence in the district? Now, an easy answer, or an easy question rather, would be, why would you send this to people who don't live here? And there's really 3 legs to that stool. So parents who choose to open and enroll their students into the district will have their email addresses on file, so they will have the opportunity to participate. Your staff may commute from elsewhere, but again, they'll have their email address on file, so they'll get a copy of the survey. And then if you have a second home in the district's boundaries, you'll have a mailbox, so you'll get the survey. But if your primary residence is not within the district, we want to have you the opportunity to participate. But we will remove those results when we're doing the prediction, especially for your operational referendums, since those people cannot control an election within your school district's boundaries. In which municipality do you live? That might be very interesting to you, especially to figure out, say in, I don't know, Perry, there's a lot of people who are saying not sure about the operational referendum. Then you may say, well, that looks like an area where we're going to have to maybe hold an extra info session or something for the people who live in Perry, because we're seeing a lot of not sure in proportion to other communities there. 2 that we always ask is, are you an employee and do you have children attending a school in the district? And similar to what Steve had up last time with the report, we'll disaggregate that for you. Those are kind of our really 3 key main subgroups: our staff, and then parents, and then non-parents, non-staff. And in that respective order, you'll see probably a decline in support. Staff are typically the most supportive, since that's their place of employment, day in and day out, they're in the school. Parents are typically the next most supportive group, and then non-parents, non-staff are typically the next most supportive group. But in the flip side of that, in the opposite order, is how common people are represented in the community. So non-parents, non-staff in any given community are about 75%. So we want to make sure we're hearing that. You want to take those up?
I actually have one more town.
Oh, okay.
There's 9, and I'm not remembering the 9th.
Don't you have 9 up there?
Yeah.
Three columns of 3.
Yeah, you have 9.
Like I said, there's 9.
Good call.
I was a math teacher.
Yeah. You were a math. I heard past tense there. You were a math teacher. Yeah. In your particular survey, we don't always include what schools your children attend, but I think based on the structure of your survey, I think that'll be really helpful. And then the final question here is a preference question. So the last one's worded a little bit carefully. It doesn't say how do you receive school and district information, because I might get it through a medium that I don't want. This one says how do you like to receive it. So this is more so, if we do communicate with you, in what format do you want it? And in all honesty, you're probably, as you put out information about any potential plans you have, you're probably going to use all of these channels anyhow. But it is, I think, nice to know just kind of the bang for your buck where most eyeballs going or want to go. And then finally, if somebody is interested in being on this facility steering committee, we have Steve's email here. If they'd like to be considered, they can email him. And then the last page is our mailer. And so this is pretty standard as well. This is where the name and address for the particular survey respondent will be. And then we have some flexibility in this box right here. Steve had suggested that maybe we note, similar to last time, that this is an important school survey, so we want people to take a few minutes to respond. And then if they have any questions, by all means contact the district office. We'll note when it needs to be done by. And that rounds out the 8 pages.
You have this nice timeline. Maybe if we wouldn't mind, please speak
Yeah,
to this.
absolutely. So we're here on April 4th for your eyes to initially get on it. And now we got a nice cushion. So let it marinate for a bit. We can certainly, I think as a core team, we'll certainly be on Zoom again over the next couple of weeks. So think about it, put your feedback in really in any way you want. We're not big Google users, but any other format, if you want to track your changes or get them to Steve, or you want to print it out and scan it back to us, we're really pretty flexible there. But we want to be ready to have you approve this on April 18th, and then things will move quite quickly. So despite all my attempts, there are always some grammatical errors, but we have an external proofer that helps with fresh eyes. He always catches them. And so we'll get that off to make sure that it is as error-proof as possible beginning April 19th. And then a day after that is when it would go to the printer. For your own estimates, we've been hearing, especially in a election year, we've been hearing that a good conservative estimate is about 2.5 to 3 weeks between when a file gets to the printer and when you would expect to see it in your mailboxes. So here we have, about the week of May 9th is when you'd expect to see it land in mailboxes. Again, that's a little bit of an estimate that would depend on the printer schedule and how it flows through USPS. We'll contact parents about the same time. So as soon as we start to see non-parents and non-staff taking the survey, we'll get an email out to parents right away. We have the survey open for a few weeks then in May, and then we'll turn around a couple of weeks for a report for you, and then be back in June to present these survey results, all in the name of getting you prepared for August, when you would need that finally signed, sealed, and delivered, and gone through all the legal process to make sure that a referendum language looks appropriate, if that is a route that your data is telling you to go into.
Seems good to me.
I have a real quick question. Back to the facility planning. Just an open question. Where does this building fit in our long-term planning? And does that fit into our survey at some point?
We've thought long and hard about that, and because there are significant needs for our children and our staff, we believe that at this moment, we might hit the pause button on the district office and await the results to come back from the survey to determine whether or not the early learning center is one that might be a build anew. Then we would maybe suggest to the community that we make that ELC that had been vacated into what I'll call a community center that would house the district office. maybe even in a partnership with the village for a health clinic for our seniors, but also an opportunity for us to have, bringing back in some of our kids who don't quite fit into the regular education setting, rather than have them go outside the district, have them come into a facility that's already classroom space created. I think about our 18 to 21-year-old program. Wouldn't this be a great opportunity to bring them back into our fold rather than renting out space in the community? I see that space filling up quite quickly with a new potential for a district office. If that's not in the cards by the survey, then I think we need to do what many other school districts have done to address their district office needs. And that, quite frankly, has been to go maybe to look at other sources of funding, whether it be fund balance, be private sector donations. I just don't think it's, I don't know that it's something that people would prioritize as a need, despite the fact that there's a need.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I just didn't want to lose sight of.
I thank you so much, because we don't forget about that either. We go into the executive bathrooms here, they're just fascinating.
The water's hot.
The water's hot.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Again, I just
It's
don't
thoughtful
want
of you to
to
send people. Well, Dr. Rob, I think I can say this on behalf of the board, how grateful we are for the work you and your partner Bill Foster have done on this. Bill apologizes for not being here tonight. He's in another school district presenting a survey to them, but we still got the 18 in you. We appreciate you being here tonight and the work you've done thus far. We likely, with the permission of the board, would bring this to the board for consideration at their meeting on April the 18th.
Perfect.
And then perhaps maybe an opportunity for Jessica, Rod, Scott, myself, you to revisit again shortly thereafter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other process questions or anything I can help out with?
A round of applause for Dr. Rob. Safe travels back.
Thank you, I appreciate it. First I gotta get to Culver's now, though.
All right.
It's cookie dough today, so.
And I think if you share your library card this week, you get 10% off.
Really? I do have that with me.
There you go.
I saw something on Facebook.
Safe travels.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks, great job. Except for that one question we're loading up.
Let me hair kicked out, I couldn't hear you. You gotta do something about this.
All right, hey folks, should we transition over to 5B?
Yes, please.
Is our senior leadership team ready to take the field?
Yes, please.
Wonderful.
If you'll give me just a moment to pull up a document that we've been working on for tonight's presentation. You probably saw a lot of holes in there that just, what's the amount? What's the mill rate? What's this? What's that? Well, we're not prepared to talk about mill rate tonight because that's a project and a half unto itself. We do believe that it's time for us to have some conversations around what could be part of a referendum related to a capital, to an operational piece. And we see this in three different capacities. I'll talk about the first two and then look to my senior leadership team colleagues to give you more layered information about each of these pieces. First piece is being non-personnel expenses. The second being personnel expenses that are related to meeting the board's strategic plan. If we had the perfect opportunity, the perfect world, these would be the kinds of positions we would like to be able to explore in the event that we'd be fortunate enough to have a successful operational referendum. And then lastly, to the point that Kimberly brought up earlier, how do we attract and retain? How do we make certain that our employees are receiving an honest wage in comparison with our other school communities? So let's talk about the first, non-personnel related expenses for a potential operational referendum. These are our wish list. Our job is to produce to you what we think it takes to run the organization, and certainly we don't expect that what we have listed here today is going to be the final response from the board. You may suggest that maybe We just don't need to go in these directions, but we owe our responsibility to you to advocate for those needs. And so let me begin by expressing that right now our Chromebook replacement plan is one that now is entering into its 5th and 9th grade. As you may have seen in some of the meeting minutes, 5th grade and 9th grade get those new Chromebooks because they cycle out after 4 years. And because we've introduced the 9th grade now, it's quite costly. And in fact, these Chromebooks have gotten to be quite expensive just because of a variety of reasons. Demand, chip shortages, sitting out on the Pacific, whatever it is, it's getting quite pricey. So we think in order to do justice to the current market, we'd be seeking an additional approximately $100,000 in order to support our district's vision for replacement planning. Right now, our staff are operating, in my opinion, in less than favorable computer tools. Their CPUs, their central processing units, their monitors are not even adequate, in my opinion, despite best efforts to include an upgrade RAM in their computers, not running the software even that some of the systems need these days. And this has been quite frustrating for staff as well as students, just simply because even the students have to wait for systems to roll up, and we can do better. We continue to partner with our friends down at Epic, who have given significant donations to this district with their leftover materials. However, the need still remains, and at $40,000, we would look to begin a replacement cycle plan once every 5 years. Every workstation machine would be replaced. There are also some technology infrastructure needs. Our wireless access points, or WAPs, as they're called, they are now getting ready to move into the next generation of internet speed. There's something called internet version 0.6, and maybe some of you can have that in your homes. Our internet access points are beginning to falter, and while we have enough access points, we're finding that the cost of replacements of these are significant, and we'll need to get on it. We don't want to get behind if we can, and we anticipate some server needs too out there, just because servers have a lifespan of anywhere between 4 to 5 years, and we back up everything to our servers every night. One of the things I'd really like us to do, especially as we move into MFA, multi-factor authentication, is to begin purchasing subscription services and store things in the cloud more than in our server space, because you never know. If something becomes compromised in our schools, not when, dare I say if, not if, but when, shall I say. Utilities, gosh, Dave, didn't our electric bill go up quite a bit this year? And so we're looking at about $50,000 or so to keep up with those anticipated increases in utilities. We've built on large square footage into this district, and particularly at the high school, and that, of course, is taking on even more dollars. You know, David has a project capital account of about $130,000 a year to take care of things that we talk about, like with sidewalks, and if a boiler goes down or something like this. We know that's nearly not enough in order to address all of the things that David has in that replacement plan I showed you a few minutes ago. And so we believe with costs rising, it only stands to reason that we would welcome any opportunity to increase our project capital line item. You know, transportation is one where we try to just stay ahead in purchasing buses. Thank you to the board for allowing us to reinstitute the buses back into this year's budget. But we want to also be cognizant of the fact that with that comes a need every third year or so, technically by our plan, to purchase 3 buses rather than 2, in order to keep ahead on our transportation costs, not to mention the cost of rubber and fuel and everything else continues to escalate exponentially. Since I've been here, and this is going to be my 7th year here in a few weeks starting, I haven't been able to increase our building budgets in our schools. for materials, and we've asked staff to do more with less, and it quickly is becoming less with less. I would ask that we find some way to build some kind of increase commensurate to each grade level, so they can get a little something extra each year given the cost in supplies. And lastly, you need to tell you, subscription services and other materials continue to rise at the instructional level, especially with journeys and some of the other efforts that we're trying to undertake. We would welcome consideration of about $35,000 extra annually to our instructional services budget. We recognize this is a large sum of money, $465,000, that there is a need. And again, I remind you that we're only advocating for what we think we'll need in order to move us further along. We don't expect that this will go unmet without any questions. So at this point, let me see if I can answer any for you, or have our team answer any for you.
How many buses are in our fleet?
26.
Yes, I think 26.
So the max amount of time the bus would be in service before we sell it, less than 10 years, 9,
It's about 15 years, I think, is what we have, yeah.
8?
We actually we rotate our buses out so that the in-town buses eventually become the out-town buses, and so that we can keep mileage to be about the same as much as possible.
Other questions for Steve on this chart?
On the building budget,
Yeah.
do you know what each building budget is locked at right now about?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but Scott, I don't want to put you on the...
We do. Do you want it like now? Is your question like,
If you can-
the ELC has X and the PC
Yeah.
has Y? It'd take me a little bit of time, but I can pull that up.
You could, well, I'm just gonna make this, that 2011 took care of a lot of that. Because each building got pretty much cut in half.
Is that right? Yeah.
Because we had to cut $1,275,000. Because Walker did that to every school district. So that's why that one's so low, and I was surprised that we didn't start adding a little bit to it.
How about I get that information and I include it in the weekly update?
Okay.
Thank you for asking. Yes, we can get that for you. Others? So again, so you think right off the bat, we're looking at approximately $465,000 as a proposal just for non-personnel. Let's talk about those kinds of positions, personnel-related positions, that we believe can help us grow our organization, grow our kids' performance, or grow our students' achievement, grow our satisfaction and our employees' satisfaction in the district. And let's talk through this. Some time ago, the Board of Education authorized us a K-5 math interventionist, and we're finding great success in that. This is an opportunity for us not to have one person now go between 3 different buildings if possible. It would be great for this individual to help us with what we call our Tier 3 interventions. Remember that circle response to intervention. Tier 1 is universal. Tier 2 is things that we do to help support kids in the classroom to help them reach a universal level of performance. Tier 3 are for those young kids who are just having a difficult time grasping certain concepts. They flow in and out of those groups. We would really like to not burn out our math interventionist who's currently K-5. The need is that great. I'd like to talk a little bit about instructional coaches. This has long been a vision of mine since coming to Mount Horeb. We are a school district that's rare not having an instructional coach. Right now, we spend a lot of time in interventionist work, meaning that we have professionals who are taking kids outside of regular classroom time and supplementing and sometimes even supplanting the students' learning. And I recognize because we are where we are post-pandemic, that seems to be the appropriate step to take now, right? Because we do have, as we saw in our data last fall, some kids who really were not experiencing the success that other kids were experiencing during the virtual phase of our pandemic experience. I believe that the investment, because we already have 3.5 K-5 reading interventionists already in our school district, I really believe that there's an opportunity to keep those professionals in those roles as interventionists, but then now pivot towards a coaching vision, which is not having somebody else here take my kids, but rather show me how to teach kids who might be at the tier 2, tier 3 intervention level, because we can get more support for those kids by having other professionals who have high cachet within their school community. We're testing this a little bit with the ESSER dollars. Thank you for allowing us to do that. My goal would be to keep that effort moving forward post 2024 when those dollars are expended and we don't get those dollars back. Right now we have a half-time reading writing interventionist, so that's why I said 3.5. I'd love to be able to make that a 4.0, and especially in the writing side of the house. I think there's extra attention that needs to be paid towards our writing performance. We're okay, but that's not good enough for me. I'd like to see us continue to encourage our young people to be excellent writers, and moving that 0.5 to a 1.0 would be important in my vision and that of our colleagues. We do know that there are some needs for our K2 around school psychologists, and I'd like to propose that we no longer have 4K partnered with the school psychologist. We have an amazing professional in Nicole Teep, who just, she's really worth twice her salary, quite honestly. She's constantly doing 2 full-time jobs in my estimation, and I don't know how sustainable that will be, or if she decides that she wants to retire, which she is at retirement age. Well, we're not thinking about people, we must think about positions. It's important that you know that we think that a school psychologist position would best be a K2 unto itself. And maybe pair that with a behavioral specialist. I've talked to the board now for some time about some concerns I see with some disconcerting behaviors that need to be retaught, explicitly taught to our youngest students. And bringing a professional on site to help us with that and pairing that with a 4K coordinator might just be the best consideration or use of those dollars. I know how much you care about the mental health and well-being of our young people. Right now, we're sharing a high school social worker with a middle school, and here again, these are folks who are just really working triple time in order to meet the burgeoning needs of our families. Similarly, we also have the same experience between our ELC, PC, and IC. That's all shared between one social worker. And so we would elect to bring on another social worker who could maybe fill out the ELC while then also maintaining full-time FTE at the IC. Thanks to the board's good work, we've been able to, with ESSER, obtain an additional 0.5 FTE in speech and language. Speech and language continues to be an area that our referrals are extremely high, and this was designed to help provide some relief. Speech and language is one of those areas that we don't automatically accept on open enrollment because that is one more IEP that needs to be written. This might open the door to some open enrollment opportunities if we could bring in additional staffing, bring down our caseloads in speech and language as well. Out of Esser, you may recall that we've hired a ELL, English Language Learner, a paraprofessional. I have great faith in the gal who's been hired. She's just a delightful woman, a parent of one of our kids here in school. But the research continues to demonstrate if you have the money, the way in which you can effectuate greater gains in students' achievement, particularly with ELL students, is to hire teachers. And that's no diss, if you will, to our paraprofessionals. They're wonderful people, but we know that they're highly trained and qualified to do the kinds of interventions ELL students need. And right now we have, I think, 38 students in our ELL program, servicing how many languages? Over 30? Is that right? No. That's somewhere.
That would be a lot.
How many languages do we have?
Probably a handful.
Like I said, handful. Here's my math skills again.
Less precise than 30, but
I got a good hand. Nonetheless, thank you. I'm glad I asked you because I wouldn't want to be wrong. The needs are there. To just put it frankly. I'm also concerned about one person's ability to take care of our advanced learning students. While she's remarkable in what she does, and my word, this is not an indictment of her. If anything, it's designed to really say we want to be able to put more resources into these young kids to expand their learning, to provide them opportunities that are supplementing what's going on in the regular education curriculum. We have a good model for that at the high school. Dare I say, I think our K-8, despite everyone's best efforts, we could do better. So I'm recommending support there. I do think we're one of the few school districts in the region that does not have a communications coordinator. And we have found that communication is key, especially with a very engaged citizenry like the one we're blessed to have here in Mount Horeb. And I wonder if maybe it's time for us to be like organizations our size and begin to consider bringing in a communication coordinator specialist, and maybe have that person also serve as an administrative assistant to the superintendent. As you know, right now we have about a 30% time FTE to support the superintendent's work at my choosing, in order to make certain that we could have additional support elsewhere. This other piece is line 21 is also a desire. Again, this is our wish list. This is what we have. We certainly know that we have to answer for them, but we felt like we'd put this out there. We know that even when we went to online learning, there was a significant shift in how we go about teaching. And if there's one thing that's been positive coming out of the referendum, it has been that we've been much more savvy about our technology. And there are some things that we've learned from that experience that we can carry over into our regular classroom, and some new ways for us to go about teaching and reading, meeting students at their readiness levels in unique learning ways. And we believe that maybe there would be an opportunity for there to be an instructional technology support coach. Much like you would have someone helping support reading and mathematics, this would be the same concept for technology. A teacher who wants to do something that maybe Will doesn't or Sarah doesn't have time to help support, this could be a dedicated individual, and this is not unheard of in other organizations. And lastly, we do believe, because of the technology needs we have, look at all of us practically have Chromebooks at the table here tonight. And we've bought more Chromebooks, but we've never increased the size of our staffing to address issues that come as a result of those Chromebooks. We've never addressed the way in which we can go about adding on those new wireless access points, taking care of servers and these sorts of things. We currently are running on a system of 3.0 FTE in tech support in an organization of 2,500 students and 388 staff members. That's a real small margin. That's a real small margin. So we estimate that if all of this were to come into play, and again, we don't expect it to, but we're just advocating for it, we're looking at about $1.2 million dollars that would be for those positions, without any reduction to our current FTE that we have in place. So with that being said, let me stop and see if I might be able to, or my colleagues can help answer questions about what was the vision behind each of these positions. Please.
Jessica?
As we consider a referendum and the fact that we have no new money, was there consideration at all about possibly a grant writer, a grant coordinator, something along that line?
Yeah, great question. We did think about a grant writer. In an organization on our size, the sweet spot for a grant writer is in a school district the size of about 5,000 to 6,000 students, because that person has to pay for their own position, their benefits, and by the time you factor in that, that's typically about $150,000, benefits, wage, roll-ups and things. And then it's the administration of those grants, the payment of those grants that would need to be taken on by Scott and his team, and they could sure use some additional support down there too. So we've elected at this point, until we see larger numbers, to maybe hold off on that. The system of grant writing we currently have in place, albeit it's not perfect, clearly, it seems to be getting us what we need. Thank you for asking. That's a good question.
Well, thank you for going line by line and explaining everything on the list. I think the only one that makes me a little disappointed is to see 0.5 at that speech and language teacher position versus a 1.0. Before I was on the board, I've heard that a referral load is really high for that, and that's a defined disability. So if we're not providing an equitable education there, I worry.
Thank you for saying that. We believe that this 0.5 gets us to that equitable education. Might I ask Ryan if you could speak to what that caseload looks like and the number of students are on your
Yeah, so that is, that would be an addition to which we're gonna get next year. We'll also get that 0.5 through the ESSER funds. Right now, we just did caseload numbers with our staff today. They're high 30s to low 40s. So that would, you take an extra 0.5, they would be able to take 5 or 6 off of each case, or especially the younger grades, because they're in so many different buildings, that would cut down on transportation and like them going and having to relocate to different buildings. And they have felt as a team that a 0.5 would just really kind of take away their caseload a little bit, provide some relief.
So Brian, from the ESSER dollars, there's 0.5 there and then a recommended another 0.5. Correct, am I hearing that?
No, this position would maintain that 0.5
Okay.
in perpetuity. It would continue that position.
Might be helpful to explain, that's a fair question, is that if we were to go to a referendum for operations in November, the first time we would touch those dollars would be for the 23-24 school year. And so those dollars for ESSER 3 in particular, run out at the end of the 23-24 school year. So this would be to help us maintain what we've established through what we already knew as our needs assessment through ESSER. I still think, to your point, Kimberly, I still think high 30s, low 40s on a speech and language case count is high. We have somebody who's currently half-time. How many total FTE do we have speech and language? Is it 3.5, 4.5?
No, we're at 4.
4.
So Maddie,
Well, now she's 4, but yeah. Yeah, so it would be, she was 3.5 and we added her to 5. We added her to 4.
well, we have Anna, who was Emily. So I think when I've been here, it's always been Anna, who was Emily, and then Caitlin, Maddie, and Linda.
Okay, so it would bring it would bring us to 4 full-time speech and language. And that's pretty commensurate with what you'd see in other school districts around the region, although that number still is not where I'd want it to be. It's better than where it's been. Other questions?
Thank you for asking the question.
The other piece, as you know, through the survey is us just trying to get a feel for where we are in terms of salary. We know, based upon the board's work recently, that our salaries for many of our support staff positions are at the bottom or near the bottom of many of our comparables. And I mean that by our median salaries. And thanks again to Sarah Eartham for doing such a thorough job of providing that detailed data. Our faculty and staff, I believe we are currently, faculty I should say, we're currently in the bottom third tier. We're certainly not at the bottom. We're very close to the middle. My hope has always been that we never lead the pack, because that in itself creates some more issues, but we need to get in the game. We need to get in the game. And by this I mean looking at CPIU, Consumer Price Index, urban level increases, and what might that be then for a potential referendum ask annually. And so with that, Scott and I have been pushing the pencil a little bit these past couple of weeks, and I'm going to ask Scott to kind of speak to our thinking behind this, please. Scott?
Sure. So, one of the things that we just alluded to briefly back when we were talking about the survey earlier tonight is, other variables that come into play, not only from a budgeting point of view, but also certainly when we're projecting budgets beyond just the upcoming year. And so Steve has 4 items up there to take note of. There's plenty of other variables as well, but we know when we budget, whether it's for the upcoming year or projecting for a number of years, that enrollment, of course, is an important variable to look at for schools. And so for us, enrollment means not only open enrollment, the ins and the outs, the students that come and go, but then also our actual membership counts. In our case, we call it the third Friday count in September. And fluctuations that occur over the course of time for a school district, of course, have an impact. And so we always look at enrollment each and every year, and certainly need to do that when we start projecting out beyond just the upcoming year. Property values, of course, are important when we start talking about mill rates, and that's something that we will use to help determine what a potential mill rate impact could look like. But the change in the property tax, in the property base for a school, of course, is important for us to realize and keep in mind. And last thing I will say about property values is we need that number. We can't calculate a mill rate without it. So that's the importance of that. So whether it's a capital referendum or it's an operational referendum, we work with folks to make sure that we project reasonably to be able to do that calculation. And then last but not least is that CPIU, which Consumer Price Index Urban is that metric that we use as school districts to help determine potential wage increases for staff. And so one of the things that we currently know, of course, is our funding for this year and next year as part of the 21-23 biennium budget. We don't, quite frankly, know what the 23-25 biennium budget will look like or thereafter. So we don't know what our funding will be. What we do know is that inflation, of course, is high, and it's the highest it's been in a few decades. And so the CPIU is calculated based on inflationary measures. And so we know that going into the 22-23 school year, it's calculated at 4.7%. That's a known variable. We're not sure what it's going to look like for the year after, and the year after that, and the year after that. What we do get a sense of from some of the experts in the state is that it could very well potentially be something greater than 4.7% for the upcoming year, the 23-24 year. And so knowing those variables, especially on the CPIU piece, you'll take a look, if you could, at lines 6 and 7 up on the screen. Line 7 talks about 4/23/24, so after next school year. Focusing on what a CPIU could look like for staff. And meeting that mark, it would be about $1.6 million of additional cost, that's wages, and roll-ups, which of course is FICA and retirement system. The next two items are items that Dr. Salerno just mentioned, which the non-personnel item of $465,000 and then personnel ads of $1.2 million. And then the last item is Dr. Salerno mentioned just a minute ago about how we compare the market and how we're able to be marketable when it comes to not only paying our staff but also attracting staff. So that attract and retain number, we're looking at about $700,000. And so if we add those four categories up, the two that Dr. Salerno mentioned, and the wage piece, the CPIU, and the comp piece, which again goes back to the report that Sarah Eartham gave over the last month to the board, you'll see an annual increase for 23-24 of $3,965,000. Now that's for 1 year. So one thing that's important for us to keep in mind is when there's an investment put in personnel, that's a recurring cost. And so an investment such as this in 23-24 suggests that, of course, for 24-25, there's also a CPIU that has to be measured. There's also some of those recurring costs, as we just talked about, that would continue. I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions on specifically those numbers.
It's not lost on any of us, that's a significant sum of money. And we absolutely take pause and recognize we'd be asking our taxpayers, who've been very benevolent, very generous with us. We know that other school communities that are smaller than us are actually asking for more money right now. Won't name one, but one is on the docket for tomorrow. And as I talk with my superintendent friends in the Dane County area, many other school districts this November are going to be going to operational referenda as well, and their prices are going to be, as I understand it, considerably more. Again, I can't overemphasize the importance of the fact that we recognize this is a large sum of money, but it also means that in order for us to really truly meet what the community expects of us, for that matter, maintaining that we get the kind of staff who've delivered as they've done so beautifully throughout this entire experience of COVID, and prior to that, we need to, my words, get in the game when it comes to wages.
What are the other districts doing in terms of 3, 4, 5 years or in perpetuity? What are they doing, or is it a mixed bag?
It is a mixed bag. There is a document that I supplied here, Rod, to your question, that talks about that very question.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll look at it.
Well, that's okay. No, just, there's out of, did my math on this, there's about 90 referenda that are going out tomorrow. And 43, I think I counted, will be to exceed the revenue limit. Yeah, 43 out of 90. And, pardon me, most every, I've highlighted in green here for you, what would be considered non-reoccurring versus reoccurring. Non-reoccurring, just as a friendly reminder to you, means that you would identify the need of dollars for a certain period of time, whether it be 3, 4, I don't think you can go 5 years, I might be wrong there, but something to a certain period of time, and then you go back to the voters and you would ask them at the conclusion of that experience, these were one-time funds to help cover the cost of wages. Do you foresee renewing this for another period of 3, 4, 5 years? Some school districts, Rod, they actually have, I was in La Crosse, so I'm not speaking out of school. Every time we went to renew our referendum, there was always something more that had to be added to that because the cost of doing business increases. The flip side of that is recurring referendum, which means that, you've heard the word perpetuity here tonight, that these would be dollars that would automatically be considered in the future and just baked into our overall budget year over year, and all. So there's some drawbacks to both, quite frankly. To give you an example, if you went with reoccurring, the drawback could be that if the community was so generous as to continue and say, yeah, okay, go ahead and move forward with this, we wouldn't want people to assume that those dollars, that's all we all ever need. Because, salaries continue to increase, technology continues to increase, all those other things that we told you in non-personnel continue to increase. You could conceivably be having another operational referendum years down the road. In a non-reoccurring setting, there's also fraught with some concerns too. Imagine if you were trying to renew a referendum in March of 2020. And imagine if the community and the economic landscape is what it was back then, and you had to cut that kind of money from your budget, less than $4 million, $3.9 million. Where do you begin? Maybe it's back like what you said in 2011 when we had the Acts 10. So we don't know, and we really look to you on this question. Thank you, Rod, for teeing that up. What do we do? Do we ask for reoccurring? Do we ask for non-reoccurring? Keep in mind that the question itself is going to be developed by our bond counsel, so we don't need to come up with a question tonight. But I do think that once the survey comes back to us and we hear from the community about whether or not this is even a possibility, if it is, we should begin engaging in that conversation about, is this reoccurring or non-reoccurring? I just wanted to set the table for you. May I answer you? That's kind of confusing, isn't it? But can I answer any questions?
So Steve, because cost of business does continue to go up, if we go reoccurring, do districts ask for more? We don't want to nickel and dime ourselves to $3,965,000. Do districts ask for more? We'd say like $4.3 million reoccurring. And then if so, how do they bank that? So, what do they do with that?
Well, the funds stay in the revenue limit, so every year our base is the revenue from the previous year. So if a referendum were approved, that amount continues to stick with us every year that the board adopts this new levy. The challenge becomes just how far out do you go, right? On a recurring situation. And so, as Steve said, the bond counsel would draft the question. I would need to double check this, but I think there's a way where a question can be drafted to maybe incorporate some, I'll just call it inflationary increase of some sort over the next few years to account for that. When I was working with Baird on beginning discussions on budget projections for future years, they mentioned that that's something that some districts have done. I just haven't seen that on paper yet to see how.
I think that'd be extremely important because, to your point, Steve, we'd be going back to ask for a referendum to the referendum.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with having to justify what you're doing to the community on a regular basis if you've put $4 million more under the limit? Are you spending that money appropriately? Do you deserve to continue to have that money under the limit? The community should decide that. not just once for however long these recurring referendum are taking, but we ought to be able to, we should justify that expenditure on a regular basis.
Yeah. No, I see your point, but if we continue to exceed that, the community supports it, and then, okay, enough's enough. You've already asked me for $4 million, now you're asking me for $4.2 million.
Answer the question. The community's gonna answer the question. Right?
You can see why there's this seeing both sides of it, right? It's a difficult decision to answer, and certainly we don't have to answer that tonight. We want to see what that survey says to us first if we're even traveling down this road. And certainly we may invite bond counsel, if the survey does say to us, well, golly, we think we could support, tell us more, we might invite bond counsel to talk to us about all of that so that we can make an informed decision. I see both sides of it, so thank you for raising it, Rod. So may I just close the conversation by just suggesting, is there anything more you would like to guide us on? Is there any additional information you may need? Are you feeling comfortable with the survey? Is there anything you think we should be thinking about that we're not thinking about?
I don't have anything.
That note's been very helpful.
Steve, on the personnel additions, I think I know the answer, otherwise we wouldn't have put it on there, but are these all A-list wishes? Is there kind of A, B, and C, or is there kind of, we definitely want these 5, obviously we want to put 12 on there, they're not all necessary, but.
I think we'd be prepared as a senior leadership team in consultation with our staff, talking with our faculty and staff, to begin to whittle that down if we had to. We just felt like maybe tonight was the night just to kind of put out our best thinking first, and certainly if we need to sharpen the pencil, we would want to engage our colleagues a little bit more on that. These are things that they've told us already are important to them too, as we did this exercise a bit ago with ESSER. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that question can be answered anytime, right? So if something comes up and you say, gosh, I wish I had thought to ask that question, call us or shoot me an email. I'm happy to get it noted. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's move on to item 6 next, a discussion of our policies and authority to assist the board's rep in speaking on behalf of the board's interests. I'm thinking about where it makes sense to start on this larger topic, maybe with Jim. If you wouldn't mind recapping your recent conversations that you've had so we can kind of shape what direction the board needs to get.
Yes, in reference to Mr. Terry Kurth and kind of his vision. To be honest, there has not been a lot new to report since I did last time. Just to kind of recap, Mr. Kurth and his wife Kathy have been very generous to the board. Terry has a vision more of like a community type giving project, whether it's capital projects or academic, however we can assist. And initially he contacted me to see maybe to get a wish list from the board, and we sat here, and it's such an open-ended question. Are we talking 5,000, 50,000, 500, or 5 million? So I went back to him with that. Kind of need more, the board would need more detail. The only update since we have met is Terry has put together a group and really had an initial meeting. That's really all to report there. So I guess it kind of goes back to our last workshop of his vision of a community type foundation.
So tonight, one of our objectives would be to kind of define the roles and responsibilities that we have as a board member in terms of, is this a liaisonship? Is have a policy for our liaisons. And those are attached to buildings and our village rep and our 4K rep. And what you have before you in your board packet, and I can pass out a hard copy if you'd like, is one example that I found from the school board, Wanakee, they do have a liaison policy just for their legislative liaison to work with public school advocacy and speak on behalf of the board to lobby for more funds. But past that, they have this very general policy about board appointments. So it specifically outlines, we're not talking about a board officer, we're not talking about your relationship with a specific principal, we're talking about groups in the public, organizations in the public, and what that could look like. So that last paragraph in particular outlines what would be before us today in this conversation. So a particular project or decision that needs the direction from the board, and then the board president making an appointment to fulfill that purpose. So currently right now we don't really have anything that would cover, for example, like a donationship liaison. And other school districts have other sort of appointee liaisons for other projects that may come up or community partnerships that they need. So this is one example. Is it the best example? I don't know. It's a contrast to what we have. And again, it's general, so it encompasses everything. And in fact, if you look down at those statutes that they list, well, Horeb already does this. We have our tax incremental joint review board member, we have a CISA rep, and then we have WASB board members as well. I've actually fulfilled all three of these roles, as a matter of fact. So whether or not we have a policy for it, it's occurring. So Jim needs direction, right? In part because there's a huge range of money being discussed, right? So first we need to, I think, address, do our policies cover having a board member represent us? And what are your parameters and comfort levels on how much work can be done without us as a full board and what would need to come back to the full board?
So I guess I'd ask a fundamental question, that is, do we need a policy? I mean, I trust each of my colleagues on the board, and it's none of my business if you're meeting with people in the community, maybe even talking about big issues like a potential referendum or something like that. As long as, the lesson number one that I got when I joined the board was, as long as you don't say that you represent the board. Otherwise, I think, I mean, in a situation like them, I trust Jim to use his good judgment to have these ongoing conversations and to bring them to the superintendent when it seems appropriate. I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time putting together a policy and getting ourselves all lathered up about this. I trust each of you, to go out and have conversations, because that's what you're elected to do, and to bring those issues to the superintendent when you think it's appropriate. That's to me, that's it. We don't need to labor over this.
So then the other issue is, isn't he representing the full board by looking at the money?
So what? I mean, he's not speaking for the board, and they ought to know that.
I see some hands, so let's get a counterpoint. Jessica, I thought I saw your hand first.
For me, it's not that I completely trust Jim, but let's say this organization, this group of funders, turns into a group. They call themselves the Mount Horeb Funding Group, whatever. And then it's 10 years down the road, it's different people. Shouldn't there be like just in the same way that we have a village board rep and, all the ones that CISA, just that yes, there is always going to be a liaison between this board and this funding group, just to have it outlined as especially as both are just becoming, this group is just becoming established, our role with them is just becoming established. I don't think we need to go crazy and make a 45-page document, but to simply outline the position. It seems to me like if I was in Jim's shoes, it would give me comfort knowing that I have the support of the board, I know what my role is, and then I can specifically say that to this group here's what I'm doing, because the other thing is that even though he is gonna know the amounts of money or whatnot, it's still gonna have to come to the finance committee, you know,
Well-
and get approved.
Well, right.
So,
I mean, that's what all of us have been taught, even at our first meeting with Dr. Salerno. At some point, sooner rather than later, we bring these issues back to him. And by the way, Jim, I trust you. Do it. I mean, if it's an interest of yours, you have a relationship, as long as you've made clear to the group that you don't speak for the whole board, then be a conduit for us. That's terrific.
I think this is very, very, very initial planning. I mean, there's been one discussion, really, so I lean more towards Rob that there's nothing formal. I mean, if the Mount Horeb funding group comes together and it's actually a thing, then maybe I can see going down that road. But as of right now, it is so, to be honest, it's no different than any of us having coffee on a Sunday with a member of the community right now as we speak.
I think we have to look at our history with this. I don't know if anybody besides Jeff and I were on the board during the weight room, but those conversations happened between the board president, who made it clear, I'm very sure knowing him, that he was not speaking for the board, and the superintendent at the time. And then that group came to a meeting with an expectation that there was a lot of things. And when money's involved, whether, and I get it, it's new and whatever, and I'm not saying we need all of this, but I think we need to make sure we don't ever end up in a position like what happened with the weight room.
Fair enough. There's an easy answer to that, and Jim's very capable of this. You have an unrealistic expectation of this conversation. So let's figure out what is a reasonable conversation, taking into account that I don't represent the board, nor can I speak on the board's behalf. So what you've asked for is unreasonable. And if you persist in that unreasonableness, I'll see you later. And Jim, any of us are capable of that, right?
Yes. I think, I don't know, I would never want to be in that position that we were in ever again. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this so that it comes out right. So Jim might have a line of what he thinks is ridiculous. I might have a line of what I think is ridiculous. Our minds might not be anywhere in the same universe. So they might come to him and say, he's like, yeah, this is a great idea. They bring it before us and we're all like, no. Or, oh, they could have asked for this and we would have said, yeah. I mean, and I get it, because I don't liaison, but I liaison for the PTO. It's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same.
Right.
So I'm not saying, and I trust your judgment, that's not my point. My point is I don't ever want to be in a situation like the weight room ever again.
Dr. Stone, can I ask for your candid opinion on, pros and cons and your sort of comfort level to all of this?
Thank you. I must tell you, I'm with you all in agreement that how fortunate we are to have the kind of board we have where we can trust every one of our board members to help represent the board in a positive and productive way as such a committee. I do think there's a couple of things that we just want to be mindful of so as not to repeat the issues of the past, and there's some things that can be learned from them. One of those is the degree to which the board is going to be asked, if at all, to match some sum of money that isn't already in our operational budget. We've just spent 2 hours talking about an operational referendum because we're already in a deficit, right? And then to be asked to do some kind of match. Now, dare I say, I'm not speaking for Mr. Kurth, what a generous man and what a kind man and what a thoughtful man that he'd even be willing to do something like this for us. It just means the world to us. But I suspect that if I'm putting up a couple $1,000s, they're going to want us to have some skin in the game. And I think we just need to be able to say as a board or as a school community, here's what we think we can do. given where we currently are operationally. Put that up front, let that not be an obstacle for people so that they know this is what's above the line or below the line for us in terms of our participation. Now, the other piece in my mind is the beauty of having this group of folks willing to roll up their sleeves and do something special for us is, I suspect, paraphrase the term that I heard was cut the red tape. To me, that might mean what policies need to be reconsidered so that we can give these folks who are well-intended, if any, some latitude. And it will only be fair to Jim to know what those are so that the board could say, all right, I think we could look at, I don't know, maybe it's the
3 bids.
bidding. Yeah, there you are, great example. Those would be the kinds of things, but again, I think if we think about those and we put those up front and say, Terry and team, we are not wanting to gift horse in the mouth, but we also don't want to put ourselves in a position whereby we've overpromised and underdelivered to you. So here's the things that we think we need to do in order to set the conditions so that we really have a very positive and prosperous relationship and to avoid the issues of the past. Those would be the kind of things that just come to my mind, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I'm just trying to think about what were the issues back in 2014 prior to my arrival. That's what I read about. Those being the two. Jeff, you would know, you've been here firsthand, like Leah. Is there any other feedback that you might suggest? Or?
Hit that one straight on because that was almost a disaster the way person that donated that money wanted all say, and that wasn't going to happen. I think we had one other issue like that before Leah got here, and everything was done by Wayne. He brought it to us, we left it up to him to discuss with them, and after they worked everything out, then they brought it back to us as a group in closed session to discuss it with us, and then we made a decision on it after they left. And then we found out that that was the wrong way to do it by the attorney, because that should have been an open session discussion. So, there's so many things that you gotta have it right from the beginning, otherwise somebody's gonna get you. And I hate to see anybody get hurt by this, because it only takes one.
That's all the more reason why I think it might be helpful for us just to discern what is that playing field looking like. What is above the line and below the line, so as to avoid those kinds of things. And when there's questions, Jim has just been wonderful on the meetings that I've attended. Might there be a way in which Jim could have a spot on an agenda to update the board as to where we are with things too? Thanks for asking.
Kimberly, it seems to me, Jim, you look like you were going to say something.
No, go ahead.
Really quick. It almost seems like two different things. Like, this is policy, a liaison policy, and this is what are the parameters that we need to put in place so that everyone is moving forward in the right direction and that we don't end up, in a problematic situation.
Well, for sure. I mean, in WASP, you can write policy on just things to do with it. It's the parameter piece that I just don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know what questions to ask.
I actually asked Scott about this earlier today. We had our voucher review, and I just mentioned to Scott that I knew this was going to be an agenda item, and I said I have not had the time to look to see what other districts have sort of put in place is those boundaries. You know, if he knew of any, or if like we could talk about it at a finance meeting in terms of, I mean, like, I just, maybe Dr. Lerno also has things in mind, but I have just no sense of where to begin. But I do think it's important because I don't want to, this is incredibly generous. Like, this is so fantastic, but I want to make sure we do it the right way and don't.
But there's nothing.
That's
Yeah.
the thing though. I mean,
there's,
the use case that we're talking about right now, the grand total on that use case so far is approximately 0.
so, I mean, wouldn't it be, with what happened to the weight room and what happened to Jeff's example, I mean, wouldn't this be the donation policy that we have in place? So if this group came to us as a board and said, we want to donate a scoreboard, then we take it for whatever that's worth, right? I mean, that's where the weight room went bad, right? They said, we want a weight room and this is how we're gonna do it. Is that my
Yes, we need to just suspend the 3 bid policy. We could only use a specific builder. We had to match funds. There was a whole naming rights component that just went straight off the rails.
And then there was a school board member who was the diplomat and all of that, that's craziness.
Well, and so here's the other thing. Theoretically, after tomorrow, there could be 3 new board members at this table. So without a policy, we could all agree that we trust each other, whatever, and I'm not saying we don't
Well, I'm
trust
not
the
gonna-
new people, but like, without a policy, there's no real, and yes, okay,
And
this
I'm not
is
gonna trust them any less.
agreed, but they also don't know what they don't know. So couldn't there be a policy where we, I don't know, cross-reference all of the things that we're talking about? The policy could be very few sentences, but at least it's all documented in one place.
This all comes down to good judgment. That's what this comes down to.
If this
It
came down to-
does.
If this came down to good judgment, we wouldn't need policy.
At all.
Like,
That-
at all, we just wouldn't need it.
There-
Everybody would have
Hallelujah.
common sense.
Yeah.
But that's our job. Our job is to write policy.
No, our job is not to necessarily write policy.
I'm agreeing with Leah, because this brings back,
Somebody write it
And
down.
this
That's
assumes,
what
this also assumes, and I don't know why I picked this as my issue of the evening, but I don't, all of this assumes that we don't know about what happened in the past and that we didn't learn anything from it. I mean, that's nonsense.
because, well, what I was gonna say is, we had everything done for the PC remodel. We got 2 new board members that April, and they gutted it. And we did not get to go to referenda until November.
And they were elected by the same people you and I are, right?
That is correct, but they should have been told, no, this is ready to go, and we had to pull it from that April, for that November's, and it went to the next April. And oh my God, the crap we took for that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Democracy's uncomfortable.
Sure is. Can we make this a finance committee flagship piece this spring to iron this out? So that here henceforth, whether it's the Kirk family, the Smith family, or the Monroe family, we have some working parameters. Yes?
I
Scott,
think yes.
Jessica?
I would say that this would be a good idea, but wouldn't, I have no idea how you guys want to deal with it, because, you know, like Leah said, it could be 3. Well, I know there's gonna be 2 new board members, and could be 3. And then you could have a split board
Yes.
instead of what we get now.
Right, so the
A working board.
finance committee can put forth their best estimation on what makes the most sense, and then the board, as a full unit, with the new members, can decide if that's the correct course of action. Does that sound okay? move on to 7A, our only action piece this evening, our 2022-2023 budget considerations. Scott, are you taking this one?
Yes, excuse me, right? Okay, well, thanks for having this on the agenda. So, you may recall that the board at its workshop back in January had some discussion about the budget for 22-23. And so we made a few updates since then. But you'll recall that this was the format that we used back in January and in previous years to highlight and outline our budget projections. So up at the top, you'll see a description there that talks about potential changes in funding. And we're recognizing that with our revenue limit projection and state and federal funding, we're going to see an increase of approximately $156,000. We will also recognize a reduction of $629,000. Now this reduction is more than the reduction that we discussed back in January. Specifically, nothing is changing here with the one line item of our OPEB, or what we call our Fund 73 trust contribution. So I'll birdwalk just for 30 seconds, and I promise I won't go any further on this particular topic, but I think it's important to note. Our Fund 73 trust, you may recall, is a trust that we use to put funds in each and every year to recognize our liability for offering retirement benefits for staff. We are meeting an actuary number that we should be putting aside each and every year to make that commitment. What the board's been gracious enough to do over a number of years is to allow us to put additional funds into that trust to make it become even more valuable for the future. What we would be looking at doing is reducing just a bit more from what we originally intended to put into that particular category. And I'll stop right there. So we talked, I know some about this back in January, but I just wanted to point out that particular piece. As far as the actual items at the table itself, you may recall that we made an addition to our health insurance program for next year. Number one, we've been able to maintain a 0% increase, which was amazing. There are many districts that are jealous that we are able to do that. By offering an HMO plan, it gives employees the flexibility, if they choose, to stay within the UW network and to be able to see savings in their paychecks as a result. And so that was reflected not only in previous meetings, but in the employee handbook that was adopted just recently. And you'll see those savings there, $752 on a single and $1,708 for a family. And that's important to note because, like I said, that is dollars in people's pockets that participate in the health insurance program. It's also important to recognize the fact that we were able to do it without any plan design change. That people, over 90% of our people are in the UW network, and they would be able to tap into that savings if they felt comfortable doing so. Remember, because there's a $0 increase, it means on the district's responsibility side, the district won't need to budget any additional dollars to preserve what we're currently doing for personnel in the plan. The next category, the next sort of box where you'll see some of the brackets there, talks about compensation. And professional compensation, which would be faculty and the administrative supervisory group, would be a 3% increase. And for faculty, that 3% increase, there's two pieces that make up that 3% increase. It's what we would call a longevity, or what they would call an advancement step for another year of service, plus adding an additional $960 to that new number. And that, again, combined makes up that 3%. Support staff, just slightly different. Support staff would get a 3% across the board increase. And then for those folks that qualify for a longevity advancement based on their years of their service, they would get that in addition. So it's 3% plus the additional longevity. That averages out to a 3.72% increase. And then the roll-ups is what we call the percentage, the benefits that increase as a result of compensation increasing of the retirement system and Social Security. That amounts to $584,000. The last line in that box has to do with the one-time bonus, and we talked about back in January about the governor's coronavirus relief fund and the fact that we received that $321,000. We received that in December when the board approved the budget modification back in February. We suggested that because we won't be looking at spending those dollars this fiscal year, we would see an increase in our fund balance for the fiscal year end of $321,000 at least to support that receipt this year, with the idea that in the fall of '22, so at the end of this calendar year, we would look at making a one-time bonus to staff based on their FTE, and that would amount to, again, that $321,000. Collectively, what it allows us to do is to recognize that for people in terms of what they're taking home in their pay for next school year, again, those that are participating in the health insurance plan, they could see as much as a $1,700 increase in their pay if they're participating in the family plan. With the compensation piece, in addition to the 3%, a faculty member making $50,000 to $55,000, we'd be able to hit that 4.7% CPIU, that inflationary metric that we pay attention to. Now, we do understand that one-time bonus is a one-time bonus, so it's not a permanent piece. That would be something that we, obviously could look at in the future with budget projections, operating referendum, and so on to make that more permanent. But we're happy to see that we're able to get to that 4.7. For some other staff, it could mean something even significantly more than 4.7. We have some people that jump multiple levels in 1 year because they qualified based on certain criteria to do that. That could allow people like that to get into the 5-6%. And so we're happy that we're able to, from a take-home point of view, see a significant increase in take-home pay, which we're excited under the circumstances of how limiting our funding look like for next year. And so if somebody's able to take advantage of the health insurance piece and the compensation and so forth, it would be over, it could potentially be over a $4,000 increase, which is wonderful. And I'm also appreciative that we can recognize people for their year of service. That's important that we can recognize that. Moving down, the last box at the bottom here talks about our OPEB trust. So I just talked about reducing our OPEB trust, and now we're talking about increasing our OPEB trust. Well, as a result of having retirees add to the plan each and every year, even though we're reducing our overall contribution, we do need to put some additional dollars into the trust, simply because we have more retirees on the plan. So there's sort of that net effect of we're adding some here and we're taking some away here. And then in addition to that, you were at least supportive initially back in January when we talked about budget, about the concept of reinstituting one school bus back into the budget. Typically have two. We had 0 this year to make ends meet. You were kind enough to find some creative solutions to still purchase 2 buses to compensate for that loss. This would be reinstituting one bus back into our normal operating budget, so we can get closer and closer back to that, I would call that sense of normalcy. I know we talked about many of these variables back in January, so I appreciate you allowing me to kind of repeat some of that item. And what it does do is it allows us to have a balanced budget, with the exception that, remember, our fund balance is going up this year by that $321,000. So technically, we have a budget surplus this year because of that. But the way the accounting world works, when our new fiscal year starts in July, if the board authorizes the use of that 321,000, we would have a budget deficit next year of 321,000. When you combine both fiscal years, they balance out an increase and a decrease. That's more logistics than anything, but I do want you to just recognize that that is in fact the case when you see the budget for next year. I'll stop right there and ask if there's any questions. There are a few items down at the bottom that we continue to just, carry forward. CPIU wage increase for all staff continues to be a focal point for us. Recognizing that event workers are pivotal to our operations. Looking at an increase for them, an increase in professional development payment, and then also, as mentioned earlier, the board superintendent administrative assistant are just a few items that we continue to hang out with.
We talked about pulling rabbits out of our hat at a time when there's $0 increases. A rather unorthodox way of getting to 4.7, but we think we are about there, especially when other school districts are already pronounced their commitment to these dollars for next year. One thing I might also mention is, and Scott, I don't know if maybe I missed it earlier, you remember when we met in January, we talked about a 2.5% increase that would not have gotten us to a 4.7. So we've just done some things together to try to, particularly with that OPEB, to reduce some of our expenditures in order to get to a yes as much as possible. I'm pleased to say that if this can be produced and approved tonight, this board would continue to, and could full-throatedly say we are providing a CPIU increase each and every year since, at least in the past 7 years, 6 years. So we'd ask for your consideration in approving this plan for the upcoming school year, please.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Lee, seconded by Raj to approve the 2022-2023 budget considerations. Further discussion? Scott, thank you for your time in this office.
Thanks, Scott.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Item 8, adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Leah, seconded by Jessica to adjourn.